Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. Today, I'm delighted and honored to have with me Avlokita Tiwari, who's the co-founder and CTO at AarogyaAI Innovations Private Limited, a AI-enabled software as a service that diagnoses drug-resistant tuberculosis. So, Avlokita, it's a complete pleasure and honor to have you on the show. So, why don't we start with the basic introduction, your background, and your core expertise, what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Hari, and thanks for having me here. So I am by training a bioinformatician. I did my BTech in biotech in India and then did my master's in bioinformatics in Finland. And subsequently, my kind of specialty that took me was using bioinformatics for anti-microbial resistance. One of these major projects that I had done before as well was to look for drug candidates for pertussis infection, which is another bacteria that kills infants, especially. So that's kind of the direction that my career had been for a while. And Dr. Prapti, my co-founder, I actually met her in the tuberculosis lab that we were working together in India briefly for a while when I was in India. And her PhD and expertise lies in tuberculosis and microbiology, basically. So back in 2019, I was on vacation in India and sort of got in touch with her, and she was like, "I have this idea of maybe doing something with respect to AMR, basically countering AMR and how it's rising, especially in bacteria, so much. And what do you think about doing it as a company, coming up with a diagnostic solution, maybe using your expertise?" And it sounded like a great idea, so we decided to actually pitch this to Entrepreneur First, where she was incubating at that moment, and basically decided to go ahead with this. Tuberculosis became our first use case simply because of her PhD and background in TB, for my brief experience in TB as well as bacteria. And so we decided to build this diagnostic where you can use genomics, you can use artificial intelligence in order to diagnose antimicrobial resistance, because to actually counter the rise of AMR, the most important thing is to actually check it the minute it is diagnosed. If you are taking wrong antibiotics, if you are not taking a full course of antibiotics, if you are perhaps taking antibiotics when you shouldn't be taking antibiotics, all of this is leading to drug-resistant bacteria. And that's the most important thing that we need to counter if we don't want to lose millions of people in the next 10 years. It's been predicted there would be like 10 million deaths due to AMR by 2050 if we don't do something now and today. So that is kind of the theme, the vision of the company itself, that we have to come up with diagnostics that can quickly diagnose AMR for patients.
Give me the lowdown on the role of genomics and AI. Can you just break that down for my listeners, please?
Sure, absolutely. So, you know how your genomic sequence, your DNA says what is your ancestry, what is maybe the color of your skin or your eyes. And, if I didn't meet you in person, I would still, from your DNA, be able to tell what would be the color of your hair, your eye, and, maybe a little bit of features of what your ancestry would be like. It's quite similar for bacteria, except bacteria are much simpler. So it's not about the looks so much per se. The phenotype is expressed in their resistant towards drugs, for example, or various type of mutations that they have incurred over a long period of time. So what happens there is that if you use genomics, just by looking at the genomic sequence of that particular pathogen, what they might be resistant or susceptible to. A very live and aware use case right now is our variants that we are seeing for the COVID virus, right? First there was Delta, then Omicron, and it will keep evolving because it can. A pathogen, just like us, needs to survive, and it will mutate wherever it needs to in order to basically become more potent and infectious, which is exactly what coronavirus is doing. And TB has been doing this for millennia. It has been around since the Egyptian mummies. It's one of the oldest bacteria, and it has evolved so much that it's resistant to most of the major antibiotics at this point, when it's an XDR TB case. So genomics plays a very important role in understanding the why. If this is resistant to antibiotic ABCD, what is the reason? And then is it or is it not resistant to other antibiotics, so that you can actually give the patient something else, something that will work for them. The part of the artificial intelligence comes in our vision of trying to stay one step ahead of the bugs. Because what has been happening so far is we are still playing catch up. We are still trying to understand where this resistance is coming from and what to give the patient. AI comes in where we want to see where is it going to go? What is the next resistance we are looking at? What can we actually find to help counter this AMR that is constantly on the rise. So, for us, taking the whole genome sequence of this particular pathogen into the picture and applying AI on it to also understand the future patterns is basically the mission that the company has and is moving towards.
We can kind of sequence the entire genome sequence of a human back in 2013. Then over the period,
Yes.
there's a group came in and said that there was a lot of repeats that which was missing and which has recently been sequenced right now in 2021. What has been the learnings of sequencing the entire human beings? What do we know at this point in time, and what do we need to know to make a healthcare better than the current situation where it is right now?
Absolutely. I'll answer your question, but before that, one clarification that I would like to give. At Arogya AI, we only sequence and deal with the pathogen genomics, not the human component of it at all. Of course, there are many schools of thoughts about also looking at the human component and coming up with a more holistic solution. But like I said, human genomics is much more complicated. It is still evolving. Like after so many years, we were able to find those repeated sequence and actually finish the human genome sequencing, even though we had done a majority of it. The good thing is that we are headed towards a very precision medicine driven efforts in the healthcare industry. So, not just when it comes to cancer, but also maybe lifestyle diseases, predicting and preventing other diseases that patients can possibly have. So, it's very interesting, and that domain is definitely where a lot of focus needs to go. For us, however, it's the pathogen because at the same time, the pathogens are also evolving. So, we have focused our genomics on that. Um, but yeah, so basically, the whole genomics sector per se has evolved so much thanks to the human genome sequencing project that had been done. Sequencing costs have come down so much. Back then, it was so expensive, but now you can get your entire genome sequenced for maybe even $1,000, and so much lesser for pathogens because their genomes are tiny compared to the human. So the good thing is that access to sequencing, the ability to sequence, has become so much better, so much cheaper and easier, that this will help people on the ground, and you wouldn't hear of just maybe people with a lot of money being able to access precision medicine, for example.
So tell me a little bit more about the pathogen sequence that you're talking about, how expensive it is, and who are your customer base at this point in time, and what has been their response?
Absolutely. So the customers that we are looking at are hospitals and diagnostic labs, because what happens is that once a patient has been diagnosed with a disease, an infectious disease, they have to give their sample to the lab to do a diagnosis, understand which pathogen it is. And then it's up to the doctor to figure out and give them a combination of antibiotics, which in case of tuberculosis is very complicated because currently in the market, you can only diagnose resistance towards maybe a couple of the main drugs. While there are actually 19 drugs, you are supposed to take a combination and you're supposed to take it for 6 to 9 months to actually get cured of tuberculosis. It's a very long drawn disease and process. So what happens if you're given the wrong combination is that you keep going back and forth because you're not getting better. And this small per se, but 6 to 9 months of getting better is then extended to maybe even 3 years with horrible side effects of all those antibiotics that you're taking. So the idea is that the minute you know that you have tuberculosis, you also know what antibiotics you should be taking. And that's where the genomics component through the hospitals and diagnostic labs come in, because we are trying to enable doctors to be able to prescribe the correct combination of the medication. So if the doctor has determined that this patient has tuberculosis through the Arogya solution, they also have in the same, day maybe or maximum 2 days, the exact list of antibiotics that they should be giving to this patient. And this timeline becomes really important when you think about the remote places in India where doctors and hospitals are not that accessible, and a TB van might be going there once a week or once a month, and as you trickle down into the country, the effect of this kind of a solution becomes that much more important, because patients can't go again and again after a long trip to get, new medication, a new combination. But that being said, sequencing also has to trickle down to that level, which will also take a little bit of time. And that is why we have started more with the tier one, tier two cities, hospitals and labs where most of the samples come anyway, and trying to diagnose from there and then slowly trickling down to the point of care model, basically.
How expensive is this pathogen sequence? Which are the hospitals that you have partnered with here in India, and what's been the response?
So basically, cost wise, it's not so much. About 5,000-6,000 rupees can easily get you the whole diagnostic solution, sequencing as well as diagnostic done. When you compare that to 22,000-23,000 rupees for doing a full drug susceptibility testing to get results against all drugs, it of course is a massive difference that's there for the patients. Hospitals, we have partnered with AIMS Jodhpur, for example. We have current partnerships going on with a couple of other hospitals as well. The paperwork is yet to be signed, so I'm not going to name them yet. Their response has been consistently very supportive because they understand why this is such a big problem. And at the same time, they are also looking for solutions that can, quickly help the patients on the ground. So that being the focus of also hospitals and labs, they're happy to actually partner with a solution that can give them a complete picture right away. We are still pre-revenue because we are in the validation stage. We have done some internal validations, which we are about to publish, and now we are working on some external validations, which we will help publish with, the doctors itself. But basically, to make this a commercial product that can be used on the ground, that is still a little bit of path that we have to go on.
Are you only looking at diagnosis, or would you also be looking at therapeutics? Because there's artificial intelligence companies who are leveraging it for drug discovery and so on and so forth. So, what's the roadmap for Arogya AI?
Absolutely. Therapeutics has also been on our mind as well. But because we are a tiny company at the moment, that is something that we have just sort of started expanding. We recently signed an MOU with IIT ISM Dhanbad for doing the R&D for exactly this purpose, for looking at also drug discovery. Basically look at all the whole picture in a very in a bigger picture manner. So take a sit back, you're already using AI on the whole genome sequences, try to see in that bigger picture what else can you actually predict or help with. So looking for mutations that are not known yet, for maybe drugs that can be used but we don't know, for understanding why certain resistances are happening. We finally, after 40 years, got a couple of new antibiotics for TB in the market, and you're already seeing resistance against them in patients. So why and how is that happening? So these kind of questions can also be answered through an R&D partnership, which is what we are looking at here.
Right. So, how do you see the role of artificial in genomics growing in this decade? And have you seen some exciting innovations that has caught your attention in the space of healthcare?
Definitely. Definitely. So you must have heard of a company called Cure AI. They were the first to actually bring artificial intelligence, for example, for diagnosing TB just by using the AI algorithm and checks X-rays to, help determine. So we are looking at basically a kind of a method where everything becomes that much more AI to enable doctors. Because at the end of the day, the doctors, we have to enable them to be able to make informed decisions. And that is what has been missing as well. If you're looking at how much time a radiologist needs to look at an X-ray and make a decision, that is, a bunch of time that is lost. If you think about the antibiotic trial and error that needs to be done, that is a lot of patient time lost and suffering that happens. These decisions can be shortened by the use of AI and genomics both. Similarly, for example, for cancer patients, imagine if you already knew at the very beginning what would be the best chemotherapy that would work for you, or what would be some other therapy that could work for you. That of course helps you shorten the timeline as well. So genomics and AI definitely headed towards precision medicine, and if we can bring that on the ground, all the more better for all the patients basically.
So there's this camp who is averse to change, and there's a bunch of doctors who say that, with these growing technology, the role of a traditional doctor is going to diminish. What are your views on something like that?
Absolutely not. I can give a diagnostic report and do everything, but at the end of the day, a decision that a doctor can make, I don't think that anyone can replace that. Because exactly what I said, even if you know the exact combination of antibiotics, what if it doesn't suit the patient? And AI might not be able to tell the patient that, okay, don't take this antibiotic, maybe switch to the other one. That still needs to be done by a doctor. The whole point of using AI and genomics in healthcare is, in my opinion, to make the doctor's life easier and help them make decisions faster. Even so, there are so many doctors who intuitively know a lot of things and are able to help patients, and that's quite amazing. And I don't think that any of this can actually help replace doctors. And I feel like maybe the that doctors get this feeling because there are companies that claim that they would replace doctors, but I think they're kidding themselves. That's not going to happen, in my opinion, for sure.
Right. So there was this web series. I mean, I've just seen the trailer. I've not seen the web series. It's called Whistleblowers, and it's about the scam here in India and how these medical institutes, there was these the students used to pay others to sit for the examination, and that's the reason we have these doctors who are not proficient, so I hope that, yes, I mean, with technology such as the role of technology growing in the space of healthcare, we'll have quality doctors rather than these scams. So is there any advice to students or entrepreneurs that you would like to give, the entrepreneurs who would want to explore or leverage technology in the space of healthcare, and students who would want to explore this field? What should he or she do?
Absolutely. I feel that one of the most important things is to gain the training that is required to look and basically experiment with things scientifically, because that is something that repeatedly I feel is lacking in a lot of students that have maybe perhaps just graduated because they don't have experience as well. It's really important to go out in the science and research world, understand ethical standpoints, understand how scientific study is designed, conducted, how it needs to be robust. So you can do a lot of experimentation, but if your sample size isn't what it should be, then it's kind of pointless. Understanding how ethical behavior in the scientific world is supposed to be designed and done, those things are really important, I feel. That's something maybe you learn a little bit by experience and a little bit by learning. And my advice would be, even if you want to start a company or something in health tech, a very important word of advice would be to have people who can help you navigate through these things. Make sure that the ethics are in the right place, whether it is through doctors or scientists, but also make sure that the studies that you have designed and you're conducting to validate your solution, they are actually robust scientifically as well, and not just in the space of R&D. So if you can manage to do that, I feel that in itself is a big roadblock that you have overcome in
Right.
this
So
journey.
where do you see the healthcare space going in the 10 year? What do you think healthcare is going to look like?
Yeah, I think I started talking about something else and missed that question. Yeah. So I believe at least that in 10 years, healthcare would be you know integrated with an app, integrated with a lot of AI to begin with before you go for a doctor consultation. Maybe you also have a bigger say in your own healthcare, be a little bit more aware about what your healthcare is, and that is something I feel that should be happening. Because you meet a lot of people who say that, yeah, I'm taking that medication, and I'm like, why? And there is no answer there. And it's something that I constantly do with my family as well. If they are taking some medication, I go through the list, I check everything about why it has been given to them and what could be the possible side effects, because I feel it's really important that patients also make very informed decisions. So I believe that having a very technologically and patient integrated healthcare system, which is designed towards a precision medicine as well, whether it comes to lifestyle diseases, infectious diseases, or pretty much anything, is the kind of a future where we are looking at. So, for example, COVID is not going to go anywhere, and since this has happened, things have evolved quite fast as well. Doctors are taking appointments online, doing consultations online for things that you don't really need to actually meet physically for. This is not new. You didn't always have to anyways visit a doctor, but you just did because you could. So that is one of the good side effects, I would say, of COVID happening. People have realized that you don't have to actually go physically for each and everything, and you can waste half a day. So that kind of a solution where there is a little bit of online integration and maybe a visit and scans and everything when needed and if needed, and how that is all, done. And then you have all of your information on the app as well to look at. So you are also informed at every point of time that, what's happening, what have been your results, how have they been, good, bad, what can you do to make it better. I feel that is where we are headed in 10 years, definitely.
Lovely. How cool is that? Yeah, because I think everything is going to be data driven because there's so much
Exactly.
data being captured, and the algorithm behind which infers our data is getting more and more intelligent. And maybe in the next decade itself, everything is going to be completely upended. There are people who are working on age reversal, human longevity. Then there's CRISPR, genetic editing going on. There's some really awesome things going on. So thank you, Avlokita. Really appreciate you taking time being part of the podcast. Would you like to leave us with your roadmap, Arogya AI? What is your vision and intent? What you intend to do as an individual on Earth in the space of healthcare, and the role of Arogya AI?
Most definitely. For Arogya AI and me, the vision and the mission is very integrated. It is, after all, my company as well. And, what we have been thinking always to do is how do we combat AMR? How do we prevent superbugs? How do we know what's coming next and make sure there are systems in place to deal with it? Again, COVID was not a surprise. Everyone in the scientific world knew that something like this is going to happen. There were warnings floating all around. But nothing was done in place because we didn't really believe the people when they were talking about it. And that's the idea. If we know today that the drug that you are developing and spending millions of dollars and billions of dollars into clinical trials and whatnot might not actually work, or it will not work for more than 6 months because bacteria or viruses will develop resistance against it, you don't have to waste the money on it. You can actually refocus where you need to. So for Arogya, the mission is exactly that: diagnose AMR, check AMR, stop superbugs from actually taking over the world. That's where we are headed.
Lovely. Avlokita, wish you and the team the very best. I'm super excited for us in the healthcare, in everything. You mentioned that even the healthcare space, at one point in time we used to actually had to go visit a doctor or a hospital, but today's the world, with the metaverse and the virtual world, you don't need to step out. I mean, you have to step out when you need to, but you can engage with the doctors or the healthcare remotely, and the world is getting excited, and I'm very excited for the role of technology. So wish you and the team the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Eddie.